So Putin was in Beijing at the Belt and Road Summit. And this is Pravda, this is not Pravda, this is RT, forgive me. And they were putting out clips of what Putin had to say. And some of these were absolutely fascinating. So I saw this one, tell me who your friend is and I will tell you who you are. That was Putin citing a proverb when he was asked, well, what do you think about President Xi? And he quoted that. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So you're friends with Xi and North Korea and Syria and Iran, like this is who you are. Okay, I'm not going to go on and talk more about that one, but I do want you to hear what he had to say when he talked about his standard talking points about how the West created this problem with Ukraine and the coup d'etat and that kind of thing. This is for Chinese TV consumption. Okay, so we're going to watch that, and then we're going to watch this how Ukraine is unwilling to conduct any negotiations. Each clip are only the clips are 2 minutes and a minute and a half each, but we're just going to watch them and comment on them as we go through. Let's go.
So I would like to remind you that hostilities in Ukraine were triggered not by our special military operation, but much earlier, i.e. in 2014, when Western countries acting as guarantors of the agreements between President Yanukovych and the opposition backpedaled on their guarantees just a couple of days later and, what is more, facilitated a coup d'etat.
Okay, so he always says that Western countries were creating this coup d'etat. Did they really? No. What happened was the president was about to sign an agreement with the EU, and then Putin wanted him to sign a different agreement. He backed off the EU one, and he tried to sign the one with Putin, and the people rose up and were not happy. He was firing on the people in the Maidan Square. He was creating all kinds of chaos. He finally ran out of town and went to Russia. That's what actually happened. It wasn't Western powers causing this. It's Ukrainians overthrowing. Well, they didn't even overthrow. He ran away. They were demanding that he not do this thing.
And US officials explicitly stated that they spent a lot of money on this project. I think they mentioned $5 billion and said we should accept the outcome. It is
okay. So U.S. officials did have a dog in the democracy fight, right? They were involved in getting people politically active in Ukraine. Does that mean that they were involved in a coup d'etat? That's not exactly what happened.
It's not the right time to debate whether it was a revolution, whether it was a color revolution or not, but in fact it was a coup d'etat.
No, it was a revolution. It really was. People in the Maidan Square will tell you that that's what it was. Okay, now remember, he's talking to Chinese state media. This is going to be broadcast all across China, so he's getting his talking points out.
True, part of it was due to the mistakes of the then leadership, but these failures should have been addressed not with the help of militants on the streets, but through democratic procedures.
Yeah, it should have been done through democratic procedures. And your little green men shouldn't have invaded the Donbass and the Crimea. That's not democratic procedures.
Western countries prefer to act differently, i.e. to facilitate a coup d'etat. Later,
again, he's saying the same thing again, as if he just keeps saying it long enough, it'll be true.
With the hands of the Kiev regime, they launched hostilities in southeastern Ukraine in the Donbass.
Oh, the Kiev regime launched hostilities. It wasn't your little green men that came in and created the mess that they created.
And conducted these hostilities for 8 years, killing women and children. No one in the West paid any attention to this or pretended not to. Agreements were signed in the...
Well, part of it was because it was inflated and some of it was just made up, like crucifying a little kid that was made up, those kind of things.
Capital of Belarus, Minsk, called the Minsk Agreements, and Russia did everything to push for their implementation and resolve the conflict.
I bet they did, because they could potentially gain from the Minsk Agreement. What you ignored was the Budapest Memorandum, and you didn't say anything about that, where when Ukraine gave up their nukes, you guaranteed Ukraine's sovereign borders. Do you remember that?
However, they did not allow us to do it either. What is more, eventually, Ukraine's leaders simply said that they did not like these Minsk agreements and were not going to deliver on them. This attitude and the push by the United States to drag Ukraine into NATO led to an escalation. Let me remind...
Look at what a victim Putin is painting himself to be. We didn't want this, but it was pushed upon us. That's the way he's communicating this to Chinese state media TV.
You that when Ukraine gained its independence or proclaimed its independence, the fundamental document that was the foundation for an independent Ukraine was the Declaration of Independence. The main provision of this Declaration of Independence is that Ukraine is a neutral state. However,
and that was true. But at the same time, About that same time, all the other former Warsaw Pact countries that fled to NATO were also in that same kind of category. And they fled to NATO because they were afraid of you, because of what you might do. So get that, understand that, and then a lot of things make sense. It's not that NATO is encroaching to the east, is that they're joining NATO to get away from you.
In 2008, for some reason, there was no crisis yet. They announced that Ukraine was expected to join NATO. Why?
Okay, now that was a bad move. NATO should have known better, and it was blocked, I think, by Germany and France, or one of the two, or both of them. And that gave a lot of time for Putin to start setting his face against the West and start plotting and planning what he was going to be doing. So they should have just simply invited him in and made it a fait accompli before he had time to do all this he had to do.
No one still does not understand this. And so, year after year, the situation escalated. In the end, the 2014 crisis and hostilities broke out. Later,
the 2014 crisis and hostilities didn't just break out. You caused it to break out. Like, that's what happened.
It led to a new escalation. Russia's special military operation is not the start of the war. It's an attempt to stop it.
It's not an attempt to stop it. Well, it's an attempt to win it. That's what it is. But it is the source of the cause of the war. Okay, let's look at this. Ukraine is unwilling to conduct any negotiations. Is that really fair? He's going to give his one side. And as the proverb says, it sounds like one side is correct until somebody else comes to cross-examine them. I'm coming to cross-examine. Let's go.
As for how and what should be done to bring this conflict to a peaceful end, we have never objected to this. Moreover, we agreed in Istanbul at one time that we were ready to do this while ensuring, I would like to emphasize this, Russia's legitimate security interests. And Ukraine drafted a very tough security framework, and we practically agreed to it.
Well, okay, so that was before some Ukrainians were poisoned. It appears that they were poisoned, that those that attended the conference. It also appears like you weren't necessarily going to honor it, or we couldn't trust you to honor it, or that kind of thing. So it kind of fell apart.
As soon as our troops moved away from the capital of Ukraine, Kiev, Ukraine immediately threw all these agreements into the dustbin.
It wasn't because you were just giving a gift of, well, we'll move our troops in good faith. It was because they were getting pushed back.
Even initialed on paper by the heads of the negotiating parties. Not all of the documents, but a memorandum. They announced that they would seek Russia's defeat and victory on the battlefield.
Because Russia couldn't be trusted to keep its word. At any time, up to this point, Russia hasn't been able to keep its word.
Strategic defeat. They started active combat operations, the so-called counteroffensive.
No. You appealed to the battlefield by invading Ukraine, and so to the battlefield the appeal goes.
It's been going on since the 4th of June. So far, there are no results, there are only huge losses. The losses are simply enormous.
Again, this is a standard Russian talking point. There's no results, there's only losses. The counteroffensive failed. Honestly, they haven't gotten a lot of ground on the ground around the battle lines, or where the mines are laid and that sort of thing. But they've had tremendous reactions in the Black Sea. A number of ships, they've been able to attack Russia proper. They've attacked Moscow. They've attacked Russian bases. It's not over. It's not over until they quit.
It's 1 to 8, roughly. We are aware, of course, of
if
the
you missed it, 1 to 8,
Chinese.
he was just saying, if you missed that, he was just saying the casualties are 1 to 8 roughly. Now, they've been saying 1 to 10 for a long time, but he was saying, now he's getting that information from his generals, who are getting that from their colonels and their captains, and they're all the way down the line. And I think somebody's inflating it somewhere along the way, and it keeps getting more and more inflated, because 1 to 8 sounds preposterously high.
Friends, we appreciate these proposals. I think they are quite realistic. At least they could be the basis for peace agreements. But unfortunately, the opposing side is unwilling to conduct any negotiations.
Yeah, so Kyiv is unwilling to conduct negotiations on your terms. You are unwilling to conduct negotiations on their terms. That seems pretty fair, that if you would at least say that side of the equation, but you're not willing to do that. You're just saying, look, I want peace, but they don't want it. No, you want peace and stealing 4 of their oblasts. That's what you want. That's different.
Moreover, the president of Ukraine issued a decree prohibiting everyone and himself from holding peace talks with us. How is it possible?
Because nobody can trust you, because this is kind of what you've proven.
To negotiate if they do not want to do so, and have also issued a legal document that forbids these negotiations. If Ukraine really wants this, it seems appropriate to start with cancelling this decree and declaring they're ready for the talks. We are ready. For example,
but it's going to be settled on the battlefield because you initiated the settlement on the battlefield when you invaded Ukraine. That's the way it works. Okay, that's all. That's what he was saying to the Chinese TV market. And I think you need to have that in perspective, that that's who he's talking to with his talking points about everything from the Russian viewpoint. It all lines up with everything you see in RT and Pravda and TASS. All right. Thank you for your time. Let me know what you thought about this. And thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.